Dr. Power, guests have arrived.
Oh, thank you, Bonnie Castle. Hi, folks. Come on in. Have a seat. There's room for two over here. So I'm so glad you joined me today. This is the first of our Smoke Cat sessions for our session. I hope you enjoy them. We'll have 8 of these, and they form the discussions that we'll have in class. Not the only things we're going to talk about, but some of the issues that we take out of the paper. And I have to take them. Today's a Wednesday prior to the course start on Monday, so we're a couple of days behind the actual, whatever the current status is of the stories we talk about. So build on them and add any other stories you'd like to talk about. The Smoke Cat sessions is something that in Oxford, the Don, the prof, had chambers, sort of quarters, and you did readings there. You didn't so much sit in a classroom, but you'd come down, and the Don would have a small cluster like this of 6 or 7 people around, and through cigars and pipes and port and glasses of sherry, they would talk about issues like we're going to talk about today. And it's through the Socratic dialogue that we exchange ideas and challenge each other and test each other's hypotheses that we tend to get some firm terrain to stand on as through critical thinking and reflective thought, that I'm satisfied with my position. I can defend it. And in this course, that's all we ask you to do. There's no wrong or right answers. Just have some good, hard, reflective thought. And if you're satisfied that your view of the hand is the right view of the hand, then that's where I want you to stand. And it's the same on the exam. There'll be nothing I say to say that is the correct answer. As long as you can give me evidence-based support for your position, you've met the requirements of the course. I don't want you to be overwhelmed with the course. Those of you who had a chance to go in and do a quick scan of the vast array of materials in here, there's a lot. So go directly to the deliverables and see what you have to produce. Just that will get you your mark that you need to have a mark to go through the system. Anything else is bonus. And I had to design it that way. When Pedro came to me and said, Terry, can you take this from a face-to-face class to an online class and keep the standard, I felt quite challenged and frankly wasn't happy about it. I enjoy the face-to-face teaching and the Socratic dialogue and the interaction and the fast moving of a class environment, and it's hard to replicate that into a online situation. But having said that, not just personally me working on it, but really a collection of a wonderful bunch of people like Bonnie Castle that just announced your arrival, and others work hard every week to get these discussions, to edit, and to help me put in the course these rich materials. And I've done it deliberately in the sense that I've had a chance to scan your backgrounds, your bios, both cohorts, and it's interesting. We have such a vast array of folks who are very skilled in strategy, do it almost on a daily basis. Terms like goals, objectives, visions, strategic inflection points, that language, that lexicon will be well known to those folks. There are others of you that I sense this will be rather new, and there'll be a bit of a ramp-up curve to get to understand some of these terms and concepts and notions. And so what I've done is said to everybody, here's the basics in the deliverables, do that, that's all that you're required to do. But for those of you that are already well down the road and becoming strategic practitioners, I put a bonus section in there. And go in there and have a look. It's not required for the exam, but you find a whole bunch of rich things in there that may help you in your day-to-day job. For example, in the second session, I guess, we give you a little red toolbox with about 40 some odd tools in there that you'll use throughout the program, and many in this course. But if for those in the bonus section, I put another 100 tools in there in another box. And more than you'll ever need in your lifetime, but for those interested in strategy and have a passion for it, like I have a passion for it, go in there and have a look around. But the bonus section you'll find rich with materials to look at your pleasure, but do a time appreciation. You need balance in your workplace, balance in your life, and as long as you do the deliverables, I'll be happy. Specifically on the deliverables for these discussion sites, I'd like to make the point that all I expect from you is 2 meaningful posts in a week. 2 meaningful posts in a week. That's not hi, how are you, but that's reflective thought, adding some value, some capital, intellectual capital to the class, and do that for us, and you've met the requirement. That's not to say a number, I've had it in the past, will do 30 or 40 posts in the week because they have a passion. They're enjoying the topic, they're enjoying the flow of the discussion, and I don't want to stifle that. I want you to do that. I want you to enjoy the course and get something out of it, and I'll work with you. But for those that say, look, I've got other things to do and my time is quite tight, just give me 2 meaningful posts on the discussion sites and you've met the requirements. So that should be helpful in that regard. Critical correctness. I challenge you a little bit on this. I tend to poke the bear a little. there's no political correctness in this class, as long as we're respectful of each other. So we have Muslims in the class and we have Christians in the class, and if we can't have this clash of civilizations, if we can't have these conversations in an academic environment, in a respectful, fair and balanced way, where in the world are you going to have these discussions so you can truly understand? I mean, for example, if I held up my hand and asked you to describe what you see on this side of the hand, you'd probably say, well, an old arthritic hand of a 73-year-old with a ring on it. But if I turned it around here and asked you to describe it, I think you'd agree with me, you'd have to describe it a little bit differently. And so that's what we have to do in this class, is we have to come around from this side of the hand that we view the biases, the way we perceive the world, and come around to this side of the hand and try to stand on that terrain for a few minutes and view the world and get a sense of it. And we're going to do that a lot in this class. That's the only way to establish this critical thinking. And indeed, you may even wonder why in a strategy course are we looking at these emerging issues. And it's because we need to understand the water in the bathtub. If we don't understand the what's about to emerge through the fog and mitigate the damage or exploit the opportunities these changes are going to make in our strategy, in our businesses, and indeed in our lives, then we are not doing our job and what you're being paid for. And most of you are being paid for one thing at your work, and that's to be strategists, to help lead your company. And so we'll talk more about that as the course unfolds. I think I've covered all the points that I wanted to cover, other than say that I'm available to you. I'll work with you. I want you to have some time with your families, and I mean it sincerely. And this is not meant in my course to be a boot camp. It's meant to have some downtime on the weekends. But I accept there's a number of you working so hard during the week, you must do the work on the weekends to get through the course, and I accept that. But I'm saying to most people, I'll expect that it's Friday night. I don't expect to see you around on the weekends. I want you to spend some time with your families, to do what you have to do, but get some downtime and join me again on Monday morning. For those of you that have to work on the weekends, because you can't get it done during the week, I'll be there, I'll be available to you and working with you on the weekends and doing some posts and answering some of your questions throughout the weekends. But as many of you as can, I do underscore the importance of you getting some downtime with your family, because it's putting great stress on the family and on your children, those that have them, and I want you to spend a little time with them. I'll be available to you anytime you want to call, 250, make a note, 250-472-3836, 472-3836 in Victoria, and I've got a better office at home than I have here on the campus, and so I tend to work on these online courses from my home for the next 8 or 9 weeks, and so most of the time you'll find me at that number unless I'm in at my office here doing meetings and other work. That's where you'll find me. So that's it. So what do we got in the paper today? Let's have a look and go through it. Let's start with the paper, and today we want to talk what's in the news, and what we're trying to accomplish here is take what's on the front page and what's in the business section and try to integrate the two and draw some so what's. What stories are being told here that can possibly impact on Canada's economy and on your business plans and indeed on your family or global economies. And so today we see first that Ottawa is slow to act on China Bank. And the China Bank, put together under the tutelage, I guess, of China leading the pack, is really that the Asians are not happy with the IMF and the way the IMF has been going. The IMF, as you recall, was put together as one of those world organizations coming out of the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944, and it's been controlled by, in large part, by America, with the appointment of, at the very senior levels, by American citizens. And the solution that they offer when they go into places like Greece or into African countries or countries that are financially distressed, indeed Canada almost was in this situation in the 60s, that were within a month or two of calling the IMF into Canada, when those, the deal on the loan would be, the contingents would be that you cut your taxes, you raise your taxes, you cut your social safety nets, you take your commanding heights, the important things, the hydro plants, etc., and you put them into the private sector, offer them for sale. And of course, the only ones that can buy them are not the locals, but the developed countries can come in and buy your assets and put the money into the pot. And so these draconian sort of one-size-fits-all solutions did not work for a lot of countries, to include the Asian countries. And so China is leading the charge of putting together a China response to the IMF Bank, and the floodgates are open. According to the article here, that Britain, France, Germany, etc. have all rushed in to sign up and become part of this new IMF. the very core supporters of America are staying questionable. So Japan, South Korea, Canada, Australia are dragging their feet, but they've got until March 31st, the time you view this, to make a decision whether or not to jump in as one of the founding members. And Ottawa hasn't made that decision yet, but it has far-reaching impact. I mean, I'd like you at some point to take a moment and just Google the word the U.S. debt clock and take a moment and see that real-time streaming as to the current debt and deficit of America and how it's growing, and look at the bottom for the contingent liabilities, the Obama Medicare, the social safety nets, Social Security, etc. Look at the unemployment down in the right-hand column, the total numbers of people unemployed and who's paying taxes. It's a very telling instrument, and understand that debt clock is also available for Canada. If you ask for what country you want, you'll get. But take a moment, look at the U.S. debt clock, and why it's important to us is it's about demand and supply for the U.S. currency as the vehicle currency. The currency we use for our foreign exchange and foreign reserves primarily are held in U.S. funds, particularly as the European Union is soft right now. And so when you see this demand-supply curve being disrupted a little bit by this new IMF, which will pay and use a currency other than American dollars to loan out to people, it's one less demand being made for the need for U.S. currency to exist at a time when they're down the basement printing pages and pages of it. And so we want to watch the growth of this new China bank, and it's just one of many symptoms that are indicating a shift of vehicle currencies, which we'll be talking more about during the course, because that impacts on how you do business. It impacts on the economic health of Canada, because we do about 74% of our business with Americans. We're so much economically interdependent. We trade with American dollars, and we see this emerging new global currency based on the Chinese renminbi yuan coming into the system. So we want to look at that if we can. That's a good topic. And all these, I say, are just topics. You can add any topic you wish as we go through these. Here we're talking about the Commons debating the military mission to Syria, and pro and con on that. And of course, the interesting part of that initially, although I may disagree with sending our folks into harm's way there, to the extent we are involved currently in the Middle East, it seems to be done with the blessings of NATO, and it's done with the blessings of the country whose sovereignty we're bombing in, invited us in. And so when you go into Iraq, it seems to say, well, the proper checks and balances are there for a sovereign nation for us to put planes in and be bombing in their country. Not true with Syria. We have not got that sort of permission from the sovereign government to say, come on in here and bomb our people. We're simply taking the position that because Syria is unable to take care of itself, therefore we have to come in and bomb the CSIS, etc., as we're in there doing it. And that causes me a little heartburn. And if you zoom out at the macro level, I'm an old fart, and when I grew up, I can recall being in the military in the late 50s, early 60s, and after a while, about 1963, we had the FLQ crisis in Canada, where Pierre Lapointe was taken, and a bunch of other folks, and mailboxes were being bombed. We put out martial law. We had the soldiers on the streets of Montreal and Quebec, and imagine for a moment if we applied the same logic to that, then it would be perfectly appropriate with that sort of disruption and the appearance, or at least the argument you made, the appearance that we're unable to control our own affairs, for an outside nation such as America to come in here and take command and control of our nation. And so sovereignty is at issue. So it needs to be debated. These sort of conversations Canadians have to be part of before we send our troops out. And all too often we see our Prime Minister, and I am conservative, I mean, I'm right-wing Attila the Hun, and I believe in less government, and the thoughts of David Ricardo and Adam Smith and John Stuart Mills, etc., are all people that I kind of align with, given the options of that, or the left hand of Plato and Marxist and socialist and collectivism, etc. And so when my leader, when our Prime Minister steps forward and points his finger at people in the Ukraine and the Russian president and the Chinese president and commits troops, I feel there's a need for us to be involved somehow. And let me say, we're poking the bear here a little bit. I want to stimulate some conversation, but I mean, imagine for a moment that you're a Muslim in Canada and our Prime Minister goes over to Israel and makes those strong statements about supporting Israel, etc., etc. Well, that flies in the face of every Muslim Canadian. And how do they feel when their leader takes that sort of one-sided position. And is it fair? Is it appropriate? Is it fair and balanced? And so it's something as Canadians we need to have these discussions. And increasingly, I'm finding with this government that they seem to be on a frolic of their own, taking these initiatives. And I don't think there's enough discussion among the Canadians to have this. And this goes on to civil liberties and new acts and laws brought in, some of which we'll discuss in this course. But that's my thought there. I'd say there's no wrong or right answers in this class. So the idea is that I'm going to dump my thoughts on the table, you dump your thoughts on the table in our little dialogues online. And at the end of the day, you sift them and decide which ones you're happy with and what you can defend. And that's a perfectly good answer. You don't have to accept my thoughts and I don't have to accept yours. But what we do need to do is have a good, strong discussion and challenge each other's hypotheses and test our views. Oil slump weighs on economy. Well, I don't have to tell our friends in Alberta. They know that, etc. Well, it's interesting today with what's going on in Yemen. I noticed the price of oil came up a little bit because of the threat. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But generally, the price of oil dropping from over $100 a barrel down to the high 40s, and there are some folks suggesting it could yet go down closer to 40, even into the high 30s. That has had serious impact on budgets in Alberta and other provinces, and on our GNP as a nation. It's slowing down. And it has an impact on interest rates in Canada, because if the GNP is slowing down, it's unlikely that they're going to raise the interest rates in Canada. It has an impact on inflation. There's a lot coming out of this thing and jobs. So we can look at the oil slump and the impact on business and your thoughts of where it's going from here. It'd be worth a conversation. This is another part, like we talked in the earlier story about the hub, that the Chinese... The Chinese do things differently than North Americans. In North America, and in our warfare, in our economics and things we do, we play the game like chess. In fact, it was Brzezinski wrote a bestseller. He was one of the Secretaries of State for America about 15 years ago. And Brzezinski wrote this book called The Grand Chessboard. And he took every country in the world and moved it like a chess piece around the board, pawns, etc., and put them into positions. And we're still doing that today. And so we think of business, we think of war in the game of chess, that we think of my force against your force. I'll lose pawns, I'll lose knights, I'll lose whatever it happens to be. You'll lose those two. And at the end of the game of chess, there are just a few pieces left standing, and finally checkmate takes place. The Chinese have a game called Go, and they start with an open board. And they go like water around the obstacles. And the game is not how many men you can destroy, but it's how much territory you can accomplish. And so we see the Chinese doing this with their great foreign reserves, primarily from America, going into countries like most African countries. Iceland was a basket case in bankruptcy. They went in there, put mines in, supported them up, gave them loans, and now they sit and can influence the Iceland as a member of the Arctic Council, which impacts on Canada for the northern route, which we'll talk more about during the course. And so they buy their way in slowly using the Go method as opposed to the chess method of up front and in your face, and let's have a battle, let's kick the door in. And we see the same thing happening here, that with the American currency as a vehicle currency under attack, which it is, bit by bit, hemorrhaging by hemorrhaging, it is taking place. And another one of those then is what's in the paper today, is that we've opened up in Toronto a yuan hub. This is like a foreign exchange that most Canadian businesses now, and this would be North American businesses actually, when they want to do business in China or some other country that's strong with China, we go into the American dollar, we go into our banks, we pay a premium to get the money, we pay a premium to exchange it back into our currency. And the banks do well on that, but there's a cost involved in just going, if you've gone to Disneyland, you know what I'm talking about, exchange of Canadian dollar for an American dollar and getting back out of it. So now they've opened up this yuan hub, this center, this foreign exchange center in Toronto, which is the first time in North America where Canadian business people, if you're doing business in China, you can go directly and exchange the Canadian dollar for the Chinese currency and use the Chinese currency to pay for your product. And indeed, China will offer on certain goods and services 210 days without payment. Can you imagine that you can actually buy stuff from China, have the use of the goods and services for 210 days, recapture your money, and then pay the bill? They're really pushing hard to capture this market share as a vehicle currency. And keep in mind, China and India are buying almost every piece of gold that moves. And as a result of that, I suspect when they start talking new currencies, one of the possibilities might be a basket of currencies with the Chinese currency in there, backed by a percentage of gold. It may happen, so we keep watching. But it's interesting that this threat again, because once more, that's that demand-supply curve, one more little drip that there's less requirement for the American dollar at a time when they're printing it, as we're going directly and now into these other currencies to do that exchange. And it's not just here, it's happening around the globe. It's happening through European financial centers are all starting to adopt these hubs exchanges, which means less and less demand for the American dollar, as I say, at a time they're printing it in the basement. Good story here on China. Canada is grim on the outlook for auto trade in Ontario. Those folks of you from Ontario, you know this better than I, that the auto trade there is hemorrhaging. The plants are closing and considering closing. And all this is flushing south, not just to America, but it's flushing into Mexico. Because location economies there, they've put the ground fertile. They've followed out with Porter's on why nations are competitive, and one of those aspects which we'll learn in this course is something called factor endowments. And you have the basic factor endowments are things like Canada has an abundance of water and oil and gas and energy. You need those, but you need advanced factor endowments. And that's putting the schools, the technology, the infrastructure in place, roads, intermodal transportation in place. And the more you have that and you're up to date, the more competitive your nation is going to be. And we only have to go to Shanghai and to Beijing to see these new state-of-the-art and underground wires, etc., the infrastructure there to understand how old and tired North American infrastructure is and our power grid systems, etc., etc. And so here we have a situation, we can talk a bit about the economic outlook for the auto trade and what we can do about it. Do we have too much bureaucracy? Are we doing enough research and development in Canada? Are we harnessing new technology? I mean, the Google car, etc. Are we doing this sort of thing, or are we just quietly paid us on the 1st and 15th to continue our ways, and we're slipping into 14th position as an economic nation, where before we truly were in the top 7 in the globe as an economy after World War II. So we can look at that. Canada's being pressured. We have an egg marketing board and a milk marketing board, those sort of things in Canada, and other nations like Australia are urging us to get rid of that, open it up, and let free trade truly run, and stop protecting these industries. We pay more for our eggs and for our milk because of these 50, 60-year-old commissions that are in place. And so is it time for the Egg Marketing Board and other boards to fold their doors and stop standing in the way of that and just let the free marketplace take reign? We could talk about that today. Certainly Australia thinks we could. Trading rules spark fear over future dispute settlements. This is NAFTA. NAFTA, we've had a number of disputes with Americans, and it goes to the NAFTA board where we can make our best case, and as ruling comes out. The same thing, the World Trade Organization. But we lose from time to time, and here we're saying we lost in Nova Scotia over a mining thing there. So lots of sense of they don't work. And so we could talk about the NAFTA appeal system for adjudicating disputes. Does it work? Does it not work? What do you think? Online bookings transform travel industry, which is interesting. Let me say this if I can, that I don't want you to be frustrated, but when I put this course together, there's a lot of work to it and a lot of moving parts. And the new edition you got is the 19th edition, and bless their heart, this publisher seems like every 18 months is putting out a new book. So you'll find often in some of the things I refer to a different page number or chapter number, but don't let it upset you. Just go to the index, you'll find the topic. They haven't cut the materials out, they just moved it to a different page. It's in there. But the text is a great text. It's a good keeper text. I encourage you to keep it, take it with you, put it on your bookshelf in your office. They've got great aid to memoirs and things in there. It doesn't have a lot of critical thinking, but it's a great checklist, so it's a book to hang on to. 50% of the course is my materials. You'll not find it in the text. It's just stuff we'll talk about as we proceed between the two of them. But I just put that caveat out there. Don't get frustrated over the difference in page numbers. There's not much I can do about it. There's no way you could have a course like this, as rich as it is with the media and interaction, if it had to be changed every 6 months, because they keep changing the edition of the text. And they have changed it. If you just go back and look, almost every 18 months there's a new book coming out. Now, having said that, this session is about a strategist's perspective, trying to get your mind right before we start strategy on how you're supposed to think. And this idea of the online booking transforming the travel agency impacts my mind, along with the idea of it says why banks feel very, very afraid. And here the banker is talking about the threat by I think it's Google and Facebook. Google and Apple, Google and Apple are breathing down the banks, trying to start a whole new banking industry of online banking and things like PayPal and Apple Pay. Those sort of things are coming in, and this all speaks to something that we need to be aware of, and that's the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is this interconnectivity that we have on everything we do. There's over 50 billion sensors are going to be here within 4 years. 50 billion sensors, and we're all going to be linked. And I mean, I can just ramble for a few minutes. We're talking about, I read an article the other day of if you can picture a dish for solar power that's lasered down to the collectors on the Earth, that's 200 miles up over our heads. And I'm not talking a baby dish, I'm talking a dish the size of 5 or 6 football fields snapped together. This is significant size, but it's 24 hours a day shooting electricity at a good price down to Earth. That's going to be transformational on the fossil fuel industry. We need to look at that. We need to look at Google. Google are putting these electric cars together. They're almost out here now. They're just around the corner. They're not like 20 years out. They're getting ready to come to us, and certainly in 10 years, I suspect the Google car is something we're going to be much more familiar with. And we're not going to call it cars. To me, it's a mobile office that you're going to get in, give direction where you want to go, and then everything is there for you. You can do your office work in this little box that'll take you from point A to point B. And if you take the drones, we now control drones electronically. All the American drones, and drones are a big issue. In fact, Amazon delivering things are now getting drones up to 400 feet off the ground coming in. It's not a quantum leap to see these automobiles, these mobile offices, actually elevated and going on channels to move from point A to point B. We talk about 3D printing of organs, which is coming, and they're underway now as we talk, growing ears, and a little harder on kidneys, but they're doing kidneys and pancreases and things of this nature. The University of Alberta has started this sort of process of looking at this. The idea of a computer chip in your leg, your hand, whatever it happens to be. They're doing this now. People get released from Guantanamo, but they have a chip in their back that wherever these folks go in the world, they're being followed and monitored. We're not far away, and we can have this discussion about privacy and not wanting it, and I'm one of those that speak against it, but the reality is, folks, that we're getting everything. Samsung televisions, the new televisions, whether you like it or not, they have the ability to watch you and record what you're saying and do the analytics on that as to what you liked and what you didn't like. Cars at the present time, we have this star service that if you want to, something goes wrong in your car, you can immediately just start talking to somebody there, and equally, theoretically, they have the ability to shut down your car at any particular point they want to, and theoretically they can speed it up and put the brakes on. All this is just around the corner, and so are you ready for the Internet of Things, and how is it going to impact your daily life, and are you ready for it in your businesses? And more importantly, from a strategist perspective, how are you going to take advantage of that? Because the reality is, folks, let me even go further if I can for a few seconds on that. It's so important when you think of the Internet of Things. I want you to think for a minute that I'm seeing that we have the capitalist model, but the capitalist model is starting to get a high rate of change because of the Internet of Things. I'm going to suggest to you that because of this collaborative commons that the Internet provides, that the old model of capitalism, that's this, if you can imagine, that this curve that comes down and slightly to the right, but the economies of scale kick in for the number of units you produce over time. The cost keeps coming down, the more efficient, the more learning, the more you produce, the cost comes down up to a point that you kind of bulk out and goes up. So, for example, if you had a hamburger facility, up to a certain point, you can produce hamburgers, and the cost per hamburger comes down until like 10 buses roll up the front of your place, and that throws up your production operations management to such thing that the price then chuggalogs back up. But that's the traditional capitalist model, and we all strive to get down that learning curve, that economy of scale curve, efficiency curve as fast as we can. But under this new model, the Internet of Things is making it such that it's almost zero-based, zero marginal-based economy. That this newspaper, it costs the money for this paper to be produced, and it comes down that curve just like I talked in the traditional model. But if you do this in line, the 7.2 billion people in the world today can read this paper. So it's zero marginal cost because it's a collaborative commons. And this goes on almost to everything, whether it be music, shows, education. I mean, you don't need this school to come into this place and sit in bricks and mortars. I mean, it's nice for the bonding aspect of it. But right now, Wharton has got these massive online courses. They've put almost 8 million people, and they're free. You can take a strategy course at Wharton tomorrow, sign up for it, and you can attend and get the same sort of instruction from a Wharton instructor, and doesn't charge you a penny. And that's all part of this new way we're doing it. I mean, do you have to come into this sort of environment or can you take little, like this course, can you take little parcels here and there and bits and pieces of it and take them at your time and your pleasure? And so this Internet of Things has changed the way we're going to think about things, this collaborative commons, we're sharing things more and more. And so the whole new business models are going to have to be redeveloped, this strategist perspective. We can't rely on the industrial age tools of traditional way of thinking. And I raised the point in here that if you look at the Pike's Fish Market little story, we end up with individuals there that how do you harness the energy of one person? And if you believe one person makes a difference to your bottom line, how do you measure that one person? It's not return on investment. It's not the traditional 5 categories of ratios that are in your little black book. But we've got to develop some new metrics to do all this. And so we'll talk some of this as we go through the course, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the Internet of Things on your daily lives and changes it makes, and a bit more discussion as to how big this is. We're getting close to the end, I guess. Time is moving on. Let's talk quickly about Greece. Greece, as you know, is a basket case. They had a leftist government take over. They've been loaned money, about $250 billion from the banks in Europe, primarily through Germany. And now Greece is saying thanks, but no thanks. The IMF story again. I'm not going to pay it unless you adjust your terms. And that has repercussions if it happens. If they don't pay the bill, that's $250 billion that banks in Europe will lose on. That's shareholders, stakeholders, that's depositors who put money in may well lose. Banks will collapse, banks will close. And what will be the impact on the euro? Greece by itself is a small country, about the size of Ontario. But the domino effect, if it gets away and doesn't pay, then certainly Spain, Portugal, Italy, possibly France are going to call the same thing. If they could do it, why can't I? And so the whole situation of the European Union, the euro, etc., can be put into jeopardy. We should watch what's happening with Greece and the settlement and how they get to resolve this issue. It will have a difference in our lives. Well, I guess the last thing I'll talk about today, and it's very topical, is what's going on in Yemen. And the reason that's important is Belbed Menden. I guess it's one of the choke points. You've got the Gulf of Hormuz over here and then the Red Sea down here. You've got the Babel place, which is 18 miles across, only 2 channels for boats to go, and that's been taken over by Hormuz fighters supported by Iran. And you've got Saudi Arabia attacking them, which is basically Iran and Saudi banging away at each other. And it's a very dangerous situation because 1/3 of the world's oil goes down and up. The Persian oil comes back up, down through there, through the Suez Canal. And this is all, they have ballistic missiles. Certainly this Yemen situation, they've taken over all those missiles in the country as they've taken over the government. And it's a very serious choke point for oil supply and everything else. We've seen the price of oil lift today because of the threat to oil supply. So we could talk a little bit about what's going on in Yemen. And it's hard to tell the players because in one breath we have the Americans and the Iranians collectively coming together to fight ISIS to protect the Kurds in northern Iran. But now when you come down to Yemen, you've got the same 2 countries at odds with each other. So it's hard to say, it depends on which country it is, which side you're on. So it's interesting. Folks, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this session. There's no right or wrong answers in this class. I want you to, if you've got any topics, put them up, we'll have a discussion. 2 meaningful posts. All I'm looking for, as we've said, call me anytime you want to chat. I'm here for you, and looking forward to the next 8 weeks together. It's going to be a fun ride. Bye now.